Hi, welcome to the Voter Justice and Democratizing Elections Conference. We'll be getting started in just one moment with our opening Native American ceremony. And then we will be going to our first workshop with Karen McKim for verifiable elections. So join us as we just get started here.
She's been on the news. You good?
Really? You're a correspondent?
No.
Starting in 20 seconds.
Is that microphone on?
Good morning, family. Good morning. Come on up front. Welcome to our Voter Justice, Democratizing Elections Conference. It's sponsored by Count My Vote Wisconsin, nonpartisan group working toward continuing the efforts in terms of our electoral system here in Wisconsin, and also Recount 2016, continued effort by the Stein campaign to make things right in our country. We'd like to begin today, as we should begin in all phases of what we do, especially politically and in this country, with our First Nation, with our First People. I'd like to introduce you to Art Shigoni, representative of the Wisconsin Federation of Tribes. Art.
Bonjour. Welcome to my country. I'm very honored to do this. It's so sad in the time that we're at here. And I'm so glad that so many of you are here for this. It's about time that we shake things up here. Thank you, Jill, for all the hard work that you do. And you should still be our president. Maybe I'll just drive you right up there and kick him out. But anyways, this prophecy, the Ashke B'Madazing, the new people, and that's what all of you are. It's a prophecy in the state of Wisconsin when it says that when the water turns to poison and you can no longer eat the fish, a new people will emerge. Well, people have been emerging and emerging and emerging all over the United States and Canada, coming together. And this medicine wheel does not discriminate against anybody. We as First Nation people, when people came to our country, we didn't tell them who could come here and who couldn't. The prophecy said that we were supposed to teach, help, respect, and show what we're supposed to do to help you along this Mother Earth, to respect it. So far, we haven't seen that in this new administration. All they've been doing is taking and disrespecting everybody. But it's not about that. We only have one Mother Earth. We only have one life to live. And our water is so very important. So what I want to say is that thank you for all you being here and doing all the hard work that you're doing, boots on the ground. And Mama Konano, Great Spirit, I ask that you would bless all my relatives here from all the nations, the red nation, the black nation, the yellow nation, the white nation. Bless our Mother Earth. And I ask that you would open up the ears that need to hear these messages loud and clear. And I ask that you would protect the family members that are here so that when they go back home, that their home is exactly the way they left it. And if they have relatives that are traveling, protect them wherever they're going to and from. And I would ask that you would look out for our elderly, our children, our grandchildren, and for our future generation. So I say, Miigwech, thank you for all you, Mawana. Thank you.
With much respect for our Mother Earth, please join us in a brief opening. Repeat after me, and I want to hear it. Mic check.
Mic check.
We stand.
We stand.
With Standing Rock.
With Standing Rock.
No pipelines in Wisconsin.
No pipelines in Wisconsin.
Keep it in the ground.
Keep it in the ground.
Keep the oil under the soil.
Keep the oil under the soil.
Keep the gas under the grass.
Keep the gas under the grass.
Keep the coal in the hole.
Keep the coal in the hole.
System change.
System change.
Not climate change.
Not climate change.
Renewable energy.
Renewable energy.
Sustainable life.
Sustainable life.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.
Thank you. I'd like to begin the conference with a little housekeeping. The workshop rooms are across the hall here. The bathrooms are on either side as we leave. In your program, there is on the back of the program, there are instructions in terms of how to access the university Wi-Fi. We've got a full program coming up today. If you've got any questions, grab me along the side. Greg Banks will be back here pretty soon. He's picking up one of our speakers from the airport. But we're looking forward to a great day. I want to begin with asking, I'd like to know who's in the house. I'd like to know that. Where you from? Let me hear it. Madison. Reedsburg.
Wauwatosa.
I heard Menominee Falls. I heard Wauwatosa. Waunakee, Middleton.
Amherst Junction.
Where?
Amherst Junction.
Andrews Junction.
Amherst.
Amherst Junction. I heard Detroit City in the house. All right, all right. Anybody else?
Wayne's World.
Waynesboro.
Aurora, Illinois.
All right, Aurora, Illinois. All right, we got Minnesota too. Fair Vote is sitting up in the other room in terms of their PowerPoint. Huh? Boston's in the house. Anybody from Texas?
Yes, sir.
All right. We're looking good, you know, and we're here because we've shared concerns. We've shared concerns about our electoral process. We've shared concerns about our elections and voting for a long, long time, many of us. And at the same time, this last run was just horrible to accept. So we're continuing in terms of this effort. And as an activist and a trainer, I remind people that our tools are education, lobbying, and public witness. And people say, why do you go to conferences? What do you get out of it? Why do you go to rallies? What do you get out of it? Well, I'll tell you, let's put this on the agenda for today. Number one is we learn more. And I'm looking forward to today, to the plenaries and the workshops, to learn more about the things that concern me and concern all of us. Number two is that we get connected. We've got a lot of good organizations here. There'll be literature on the tables out. You'll have access to the speakers and some of the profiles there. There's information as how to connect with them later on. And number three is that we gain more energy to do the work. So let's check on this as we close out later on. Let's start our opening plenary. I'd like to ask Dr. Jill Stein, Karen McKim, Attorney Chris Mueller to join us on the stage. And as you're approaching, in your packet is our preliminary report on the Wisconsin recount. And that's what we're here together in terms of this session, to get some personal feedback on it. Also, if time allows, we'll allow for some question and answer after the session. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Dr. Jill Stein.
How's everybody doing today? All right. Thank you all so much for being here, because this is a grassroots movement. This is a demand for real democracy. We are a demand for a voting system that we can trust, which is accurate, secure, and just, and which is free from the scourge of Jim Crow in our elections. And it's thanks to all of you that the recount developed. It's thanks to 161,000 people who on Thanksgiving weekend decided they wanted something to be thankful for after this really toxic election with a very toxic result. And I think what many people are realizing is that if we want outcomes of elections that we can feel good about, we need to have that voting system that we can trust. That we elected a president who has rock bottom approval ratings from among two choices who were the most disliked and untrusted in our history, and in which throughout most of the election, the main question in people's minds was, who do I hate the most? That's not what democracy looks like. Democracy needs an affirmative vision, it needs a moral compass, and it needs a voting system that actually allows us to lead the way with our values and our vision. And that means essentially a voting system in which we have the right to vote, so free of voter suppression, free of voter ID laws, and this interstate cross-check system. Does that ring a bell to people? You familiar with that? It's a system that essentially strips the voter rolls of names, in particular names that are common among African Americans and common among Latinos. So it sort of purges people that the political establishment would rather not have voting. So, we need to end voter suppression. We also need to end voter intimidation. We need to be able to vote without fear. We need to be able to vote for who we're for instead of against what we fear, because that politics of fear doesn't have such a good track record. It basically delivered everything we were afraid of. When you're told that you have to vote for the lesser evil so that you won't have the offshoring of our jobs or the meltdown of the climate, the endless expanding wars, the attack on our civil liberties, well, it turned out that's exactly what we've gotten, not just in this election, but in several elections. The politics of fear keeps delivering what we're afraid of. So we need an affirmative politics, and the good news is that that is as simple as an electoral reform known as ranked choice voting. Does that ring a bell to people? Also, proportional representation, which I know there will be a workshop about, among others, today. So that's a fixable problem, because we not only have a right to vote, we have a right to vote without fear, and we have a right to know who we can vote for. In this election, where 44% of voters didn't have reason to come out and vote, which had something to do with the outcome, because they didn't like the two choices being rammed down our throats, a full 75% of people were screaming for other choices and other voices. We have a right not only to vote, but to know who we can vote for. That means having open debates. Do you think that would be a good idea? So we need a People's Debate Commission instead of this corporate two-party scam of a debate commission. We need to have a vote in which we are not redistricted to make some of our votes meaningless. We need to have a vote in which our votes are actually, equal and fully represented, not this system of electoral college that strengthens certain states. In particular, it was the old slave states. So another, absurdity that gave us the result where a candidate who lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes is today the occupant of the White House. We need a direct popular national vote so that our votes actually count. And finally, we need to be sure that our votes actually are counted. And this is where the Jim Crow thing comes in. This was one of the major findings where we were able to go forward with the recount, that we affirmed what the U.S. Civil Rights Commission says, which is that if you're living in a community of color, the odds are increased 900% that your vote will be discounted, miscounted, or simply tossed away. And in fact, we found in Detroit that some 84, 85 voting machines, actually 87, thank you, Anita. Thank you. 87 voting machines in Detroit outright failed. And they failed, guess where? In communities of color. And why is that? It's because under-resourced communities do not have the resources they need to ensure that these machines are well maintained, that they are properly calibrated, that it is modern and adequate equipment. So once again, this is that scourge of Jim Crow, of racial disparities, of suppression of voting justice and just plain old racial justice that is rearing its head again inside of our voting system. So these are all the things that we're working on, and what we're trying to do within this movement now, and it is a movement for voting justice. We want to ensure that we are addressing all of these issues. And in particular, we are focusing on getting rid of these outdated, unreliable, tamper-friendly, error-prone electronic voting machines, the touch screens. We should do away with them for once and for all. We also need to have statistical assurance that our votes are being counted properly. So we need a paper ballot that provides a durable record so we can actually count that vote both with either scanners or with our eyeballs. And if we're using scanners, we need to cross-check those scanners with statistical audits to be sure that that's accurate. And we need automatic recounts. You shouldn't have to hold a bake sale on steroids and raise $3.5 million in order to ensure that your vote is counted and counted accurately. Most democracies around the world, people say to us, well, isn't that a lot to ask? How presumptive, how presumptuous are you being to, insist on this exorbitant recount. Well, a recount should not cost us that amount of money, and a recount is how we apply transparency and accountability to our elections. If we can't recount our elections, we can never hold our elections accountable. So this should be built in, it should be automatic. Whenever the vote is very close, which is the way that it works in most democracies around the world. They have automatic recounts. You don't have to go raise the money and file a petition for it. In the state of Pennsylvania, where 85% of voters vote on these touchscreen machines, these electronic black boxes that have no paper record whatsoever, in order to check on your vote, you need each of 9,000 precincts to have 3 people file affidavits. That's 27,000 affidavits that have to be filed in order to get a recount done. So this enormous amount of paperwork has to be done, and they don't tell you where that paperwork has to be filed or the date that it has to be filed. So this is just, they could not possibly create a more obstructive system to ensuring just that our plain old bedrock foundation of democracy is accurate and secure. On the issue of security, in this election, as you know, there were many questions raised about security and what was or wasn't being hacked or leaked, etc. We know that the voter databases in something like 20 states were intruded upon, and we don't know who did that, but we don't need to know who did that in order to establish that we need security in our election system. And for some reason, the powers that be wanted to say that hacking was going on everywhere except in our voting machines. So, how exactly do they know that if they refuse to examine the voting machines, which is the only way you can possibly know? And their claims that these are not connected to the internet, etc., are absolutely false. I'm sorry, James Comey from the FBI, but what you said is actually not true, that these machines do have the capacity to connect to the internet, and they're also all programmed by information cards, USBs and so on, that are all connected to the internet themselves. So there are infinitely many ways, and there is no built-in security. There are no security standards. This electronic equipment is all privately owned. It is proprietary. And even though we have a right, having filed a recount, we have a right to examine the electronic infrastructure of our vote, that has not been accorded to us yet. So thanks to our wonderful attorneys like Chris Miller, who you'll hear from in a moment, we are on the case here. And the recount is not over, and I'll end with this. The recount lives on. Not only did 161,000 people come forward on Thanksgiving weekend and achieve, a miraculous result, raising some $7 million approximately over the course of a week, we thought this was a Hail Mary. We started on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, knowing that there was a deadline, I believe on Friday or Monday, I don't remember. It was Friday, okay, and then the next one was on Monday. And we had to raise about $5 million at that time. And there was just no way that that was going to happen. We put out a press release, we sent out an email, and we put up a website, and the next thing we knew, within 24 hours, there was about $1.5 million, and it just kept going. And we realized that, this is what democracy looks like, and that democracy has not been snuffed out. It has not been steamrolled. We have not forgotten who we are, that we are a nation founded on the principles of democracy, and that we were going and are going to create a voting system that we can trust. So the American people stood up and said, we're going to do this. They funded it. They came forward. Over 10,000 volunteers came forward on that weekend and said, we are going to count that vote, we are going to provide the observers necessary, the people power, and make sure that that happens. And we continue in the court of law. So this is not over, and within 1 week, we were scammed on, or I should say smeared on mainstream media, both by Rachel Maddow, who was mocking the recount, and myself, and Kellyanne Conway, who was also had her alternative facts about the recount, that it was an abuse of public money. Well, actually, we the taxpayers were funding it, or I should say we the donors were funding this. This was not taxpayer funded. So when you're attacked in the course of 1 week by both elements of the corporate media, you know that we're really shaking the system up. And we are continuing. We've just finished a tour of California. David Cobb and I were doing a tour of colleges in California in conjunction with the Green Party State Convention. And the enthusiasm is just off the charts. I've never seen it like this. People really are standing up. Suddenly we realize that we're all in the target hairs. Politics has become a spectator sport once again, which is what democracy has to be. And the recount, I have to say, is absolutely front and center in what we heard and what we saw in speaking with thousands of people over the course of the last week. That people are very inspired and uplifted by the work that this group has done. So I want to give a big thank you to Count My Vote, a big thank you to everyone here, and a big thank you also to Karen McKim, who's also going to follow me here and who's been such a engine of what this group has accomplished. So thanks to all of you, and I look forward to an exciting day or two of discussions and the work that we're going to continue from here. We've only just begun. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Karen McKim. I'm from Wisconsin. I've been on this election integrity week for about 5 years as a volunteer after I retired. I worked for state government for about 30 years before I retired in quality management and management audits and all the sorts of things that, let's make sure government is working right. It was my 30-year profession. And I retired and thought I was going to get into the freelance writing gig. But right after I retired, I was approached by a municipal clerk, a retired municipal clerk, who said, Karen, there is this one area that desperately needs management auditing, and you've got the skills and you've got to get into this. And he told me about how our votes are counted. And I was quite taken aback and looked into it, and everything he said was true, and that's how I got into this business. But before I start to tell you what we found in the Wisconsin recount this time, I want to share with you a little trick I learned with the Legislative Audit Bureau that has served me very well, not just when I worked there, but ever afterwards. When you go into any place and you're going to check to see what's the problem here, the first thing you need to mentally do is figure out, when I go in there, what is it that if I see it, I'll say, hey, everything's fine. You have to get the standard for what you want to see in your mind first, before you run around finding problems. So I'm going to do a little exercise with you right now. Think of any other computer you use anywhere. Your ATM, the computer inside the gas pump that meters your gasoline, the computer inside the grocery store scanner at checkout, the computer that calculates your property tax bills. Just think of one computer, not a voting machine, some other computer. Okay? Now, it's a computer. Every now and then it's going to start to malfunction. Suppose this computer is starting to just mess up 1% of the transactions. Either not notice them or miscount them in some way. Got that in your mind? Okay, now there's a manager for that computer. How does that manager know that his machine is starting to malfunction, his or her machine is starting to malfunction? Got that in your mind? Managers have some routine way of noticing. Okay, when the manager notices that the machine is malfunctioning 1% of the time, what does the manager do? Got that in your mind? Okay, now you've got your standard. Managers have ways to notice if their machines are malfunctioning, and they have something to do when they notice it. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the Wisconsin recount. On election night, November 8th, 2016, poll workers closed down the 3 precincts in the city of Marinette. When a poll worker closes down a poll, they push a button and the machine prints out a tape. They used a machine called the Eagle Optec, or Optec Eagle, in the city of Marinette to count the early and absentee ballots. They pushed the button in the first polling place, and the machine said, I counted 303 ballots, and on 29 of them, I saw no vote for president. Now that's called an undervote. The ballot was cast, no vote for president. 10%, almost 10% of the ballots that went through that machine had no vote for president. That's unheard of in a presidential election. People don't cast ballots and leave president blank. Second polling place, they pushed the button, they printed out the tape. 26.5% of the ballots did not have a presidential vote that the machine noticed. Third precinct, push the button, look at the poll tape. 31% of the ballots had no vote for president as far as the voting machine could see. Okay, these are unbelievable undervote rates in a presidential race, okay? Poll workers take the poll tapes, they look at them, they make sure that the number of voters in the poll book equals the number of ballots that were cast. Wisconsin poll workers are really good at that, by the way, and that is an important part of an audit, checking to make sure you have the right number of ballots. And they packed up all the records and they sent them to what's called the municipal canvass. The municipal canvass can happen in the week following the election. They've got a week to do it. It's the municipal clerk with some experienced election workers. They're supposed to review all the materials they get from the polls and the precincts and check to make sure they're okay and certify the municipal results and send the rest of the results off to the county canvass. Municipal clerk looked at these poll tapes and said, fine, and sent them on to the county clerk. Marinette County Canvass is the next 2 weeks. Actually, they usually do it in 1 week, but they can ask for a third week if they want after the election. Job of the county canvass is to make sure that the results are right in the state and county races. They got the poll tapes, they had the poll tapes from the city of Marinette voting machines, and they looked at them and had their week or 2 weeks to look at them. County clerk, representative of the Republican Party, representative of the Democratic Party. And they signed the statement. We have reviewed these election results and we verify that they are correct and true, is what they're from. Sign their names, send it off to the Wisconsin. No investigation, no resolution. 3 poll tapes from 3 machines showing obvious miscounts. They sent the results to the Wisconsin Election Commission. Now, our hero, Dr. Stein, asked for a recount, which doesn't usually happen. And because she asked for a recount, because we pay for it, we know of this error. In most elections, we wouldn't know of it. And if she hadn't asked for the recount, and if we hadn't paid for it, 304 voters in the city of Marinette would have been completely disenfranchised in this presidential election. Now, that didn't meet your standard, right? Managers are supposed to know when their machines are malfunctioning, and they're supposed to do something about it when they see that. Sounds scandalous, right? Now, I'm going to tell you the real scandal. On November 2nd, 2004, in the city of Medford, in Taylor County, poll workers pushed the buttons on their machines and printed out the poll tapes. In that presidential election in the city of Medford, 1/3 of the ballots appeared to be blank to the voting machines. And the city of Medford certified, and the Taylor County certified, and at that time it was the GAB, certified the presidential race and sent the electors to Washington. Now, we know about that miscount, not because someone asked for a recount, but because in May of the following year, a researcher from Michigan was going through Wisconsin and doing research on Wisconsin voter behavior and looked at the results from the city of Medford and said, that's not right, and showed it to the Taylor County clerk, and Taylor County clerk said, that's not right, and they pulled out the ballots, and of course people had voted for president. The voting machine just malfunctioned and couldn't see 1/3 of the votes for president. But now that was certified all the way through, and electors were sent to Washington on that basis. That never got corrected. So at that point, Wisconsin election officials, municipal, county, and state, knew there was a problem with voting machines, even if they denied it before then. At that point, it was undeniable the voting machines sometimes unexpectedly produced significant miscounts. They knew that. May of 2005, even if they'd been denying it before. I mean, we knew it anyway, but also at that point, Wisconsin election officials, municipal, county, and state, knew that the county procedures, or the canvass procedures, they're used by municipalities and counties in Wisconsin, are capable of certifying as final election results even obvious miscounts. They've known this since May of 2005. That, in my book, is the real scandal. Since that Medford miscount, there have been 46 statewide elections that were not fully recounted, like the one in last November. So basically, the first time we do a statewide recount, a full recount of an election, we find the same error that we found in Medford. And 46 elections went between in the middle that were not checked for accuracy. How many of those 46 elections had the same kind of miscount? How big were those miscounts? We don't know, because Wisconsin County canvass procedures do not include accuracy checks. That's the scandal, and that's what was demonstrated by our recount. Now, I don't want to just pick on the city of Marinette. Oneida County left out 440 votes when they reported Oneida County's results to the state in the town of Hazelhurst. It made it look like the people in the town of Hazelhurst, that 53% of them had left their ballots blank for president. Certified, reported to the state, would have been certified but for the recount. Milwaukee County reported results from Ward 34, I think, just missing 246 votes, just left them out. If you looked at it, it looked like 40% of the voters there had not voted for president. Certified municipal, certified county, certified, it would have been certified at the state if not for the recount. Eau Claire County went the other way. One of their precincts where 246 people voted, they certified 306 votes. It's not just that our county and municipal clerks don't look for subtle. I mean, we imagine, how would someone hack an election? Oh, they would do something subtle and change a little few votes here and a little. No, they could just eliminate 30% of the votes and no one would notice, or they would notice and certify anyway. When we accept 30% missing votes and just certify anyway, look at, I mean, the point Dr. Stein made about putting malfunctioning voting machines in certain precincts, what kind of an opportunity does that give a municipal clerk when we tolerate some machines that just miss 30% of the votes? What opportunity does that give hackers? You know, if they don't have to be subtle about it, they can just erase 30% of the votes and the election results will get certified in Wisconsin. This is the scandal. But here's the other thing. I want to repeat another phrase from Dr. Stein. The good news is this is a fixable problem. Right now, municipal and county clerks in Wisconsin, under current law, have everything they need to just start doing sensible management practices that are in use in other states. Sensible outcome confirming audits during the canvass process. Wisconsin county clerks have as much time or more for the county canvass than other than their counterparts in other states have, who do some sort of verification before they certify. Every ballot in Wisconsin has a paper trail. If you use a touchscreen, it's not the best paper trail, but most voters in Wisconsin use a paper ballot. These are highly auditable elections in Wisconsin. Auditable. We need to turn auditable elections into audited elections. The one thing that is missing that's preventing Wisconsin from having verified accurate election results is citizen interest and citizen involvement. The other thing Wisconsin has going for it, we have wonderful laws about citizen observation. We can attend these municipal campus meetings. We can attend these county campus meetings. We can sit there and say, that's a 10% undervote rate. That's not right. Do something. And another thing I have to say, this is going to be fun, but I mean, look around this room at all the empty seats and all the full seats. And I ran for county clerk last November. I ran for Dane County Clerk. I didn't win. I didn't think I would. I was running against a popular incumbent Democrat. But I did manage to raise a lot of really good issues and get some of the newspapers in Madison to take this issue seriously for the first time, which is an accomplishment. But I spent several months walking around just talking to voters about this issue. The interest in this issue is 100%. There is no voter that does not want verified, accurate elections. And what's going on is why this room is half filled is because all those other voters think that somebody is going to do it for them. All the people that are not in this room right now are counting on the people who are in this room to get the word out and to take action. And so that's a burden, but that's why we're here. We're different than other people. And we can pick up and do the work and spread the word. Wisconsin's elections are verifiable, and they need to be verified, and we can do it by working with our municipal and county clerks. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Miller. That's what we found in the recount. He's got the continuing recount and some of the legal issues that are going on.
George mentioned when he was first up here that part of the purpose of something like today is to learn more. How's this? Better? Okay, sorry. My father's a teacher, and I should probably use my teacher voice, I guess. One of the things George said this morning was, we're here to learn more. And I can tell you from both having lunch with Karen yesterday and listening to her again today, I have already learned a lot more about what's been going on. And I've been involved with election law and election matters in Wisconsin for about 15, 16 years now since I've been practicing. So Karen is a wonderful resource, and that was a very interesting, interesting presentation. The other thing that was mentioned, this was mentioned by Dr. Stein, and I think this is a resounding theme, at least it grabbed me, and it's a resounding theme for today and beyond, is we need a voting system we can trust. And so part of my role here today, I guess, is to tell you about some of the legal efforts that have been undertaken to try and ensure that we do have a voting system that we can trust and we can have confidence in the results. Just by way of context, so you know my role, Dr. Stein has what we call National Counsel out in New York City, folks at Emery, Shelley, Brinkerhoff, and Abadi, who were and are terrific lawyers. They represented Dr. Stein in the 3 states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I served as sort of the local point of contact, local counsel for them in Wisconsin. Part of that job was answering questions from folks. I'm sure some of you were in the field, observing the actual recount as it went on, and as questions arose. There was a great team of volunteer lawyers, and I would try and answer, troubleshoot as many questions as possible, so to speak. The other part was assisting when we went to court, and that's what I'll try and give you a quick, as quick as a lawyer can, short summary of what happened in a couple of court cases and what's going on now. So the first case was, as Dr. Stein mentioned, we went to state court, and we tried to, and we were in Dane County Circuit Court, and we tried to get a court order to have a statewide hand recount, which is recognized probably as the most accurate way to recount every single vote. The The statute has a very high standard for forcing a recount. And I'm sorry I'm going to look down, but I want to make sure I read this standard correctly. You need to show by a clear and convincing evidence that due to an irregularity, defect, or mistake committed during the voting or canvassing process, a recount using machines will produce incorrect recount results, and that there is a substantial probability that recounting ballots by hand will produce a more correct result and change the outcome of the election. So there's a lot going on there where you have to, provide a lot of evidence to force a hand recount. There was going to be a recount. The question was, could we force it by hand? We presented testimony from 3 nationally recognized experts in this field before the court. Dr. Alex Halderman is from the University of Michigan, Dr. Philip Stark from the University of California, Berkeley, and Professor Ronald Grivist from MIT. So we had very good experts who have studied this and make this a very heavy emphasis of their work. And they, in sum, I guess, provided a lot of testimony about some of the statistical anomalies that they were seeing, as well as the vulnerabilities of the automated tabulating machines, the vulnerabilities to, outside interference, hacking, tampering, those sorts of things. They pointed out, in general, how these machines can be very vulnerable. And speaking of learning, I learned a lot listening to them and reading some of their reports as well. Just stepping back, I personally, like I said, I've been involved in these things for a number of years, and I've had a certain amount of faith. Obviously, there's going to be, it's a human endeavor, so there's going to be mistakes. But I have a fair amount of trust in the process, and when I listen to these guys, it way opened my eyes to what's going on. And I would be the first to say that I'm not a computer expert in any way, shape, or form, but it was very eye-opening to what's going on. And so anyways, Judge Bailey Reed in the Dade County Circuit Court ultimately ruled that we hadn't met that high burden, that a hand recount was required here under the law. And the problem that we kind of knew we were facing, and that was part of her decision was, she said, well, I understand all of the vulnerabilities, I understand all the problems, and I understand that your problem is that in order to provide proof, you need to do the recount, or need to do a hand recount in order to, demonstrate the problem. So it was sort of the chicken or the egg thing. And she said, look, I understand all this, but at the end of the day, the law requires me to, deny your motion, even though, and this, I'll quote her quote her ruling as well. She says, a recount isn't a threat. Instead, it should be an affirmation of the democratic process. She also said, and I think we can all agree, that a hand recount is the gold standard. So while she recommended it, and she saw the problem, she saw the issue, she said, look, at the end of the day, I can't go there, talk to your legislature, try and work on the law, work on the rule. And that, as an aside, I guess, is what some of this is about as well. We're educating, we're learning, and hopefully we can educate our legislators as to these issues. So a couple days after that court hearing, a couple of pro-Trump PACs filed a lawsuit in federal court in the Western District of Wisconsin. After the election commission and the judge, the state court judge had said, go with your recount, and the counties get to decide how they want to do it, they filed a lawsuit to stop the recount. Now, I'm not going to spend as much time describing this particular lawsuit because there wasn't much there and the judge made pretty short shrift of it. What basically happened was the pro-Trump PACs went in, they asked for an immediate halt to the recount, Without Dr. Stein or the Election Commission filing any papers, the judge denied it just on the face of what they had filed. They denied the immediate relief, and the judge said, I'll have a hearing in a week. And of course, by that point, things were going to be far enough along where it probably wasn't going to have much effect anyway. So, and that turned out to be true. We went to court, we had a hearing. We actually didn't end up having to say much. The folks came in from New York. The judge basically, I think it was, if I had a nickel for every time he was looking at Trump's counsel saying, "Is that all you got?" I could have bought a latte at Starbucks or something. So the whole thing lasted about 20 minutes, and that was it. They were done. So, but that's not the end of the saga. I know this has been referenced. Not everything is done. While the recount was going on, we requested that the campaign be permitted to inspect the software components of the voting, the automatic voting machines. Now, there's a statute that permits this. It's Section 5.905 of the Wisconsin statutes. Now, this is a relatively new statute, and part of the reason it's ongoing is because it's never been applied before. So while 3 months ago we made the request, it's not like nothing's been done. There have been back and forths, but what I can tell you is the basic issue is, what's the scope of the inspection? The statute says you can inspect. What does that mean? Well, there's a couple problems here. One of the problems is the statute said that the Government Accountability Board and now the Election Commission was supposed to promulgate rules as to what this means and what a procedure would be. That hasn't been done. So there are no real set procedures or rules yet. I'm sure they're now figuring that they need to do that. The vendors, the people who own the software, have put it in escrow, but they say that they have some proprietary interests, and they can have proprietary interests in some of their software. But at the same time, the statute gives us a right to look at it and to make sure that everything was functioning properly that day. So, without getting into the weeds, and I really can't at this point, negotiations are ongoing. There will be an inspection. The question is, how much more fighting is there going to be? What exactly is it going to look like? But there will be something, and we can stay tuned on that. We'll be reporting back, I'm sure. So, I guess that's my basic report. I hope that this is a wonderful gathering. George also mentioned Get Connected. I have enjoyed getting connected with some of you, and again, our lunch yesterday, and I look forward to our ongoing dialogue. And this does give me energy for going on and trying to keep up our efforts to ensure that we do have a voting system we can trust. Now, I don't know, George, we had mentioned maybe a couple of questions. I can't stay the rest of the day. I have a 4-year-old at home. My wife is out of town and she needs rescuing. So if there are a couple of questions, I guess if it's okay with George, I'm happy to take a couple of questions right now. Or if others have quick questions, may have a couple minutes, or how do you want to do it?
There's some live microphones so everyone can hear.
We have somebody who is physically hampered by her injury. He has a question. Chris?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if there's somewhere we can go to follow the work you're doing. Is there anything like that that's out there?
Well, eventually, I would imagine some things will be posted on the Election Commission website. They're not going to put everything out there right now. In terms of that software thing, there's No. No, other than the website when, as it progresses or as, things reach final solution, or like if it, if it goes to court, you'll be able to track it on the court's website too.
Jill2016.com is your go-to reference point for information on the recount.
There you go. That's even better.
Say that again.
Jill2016.com.
Even better.
Okay, I'll take the stack here. Can we start with this lady here? She was first, and we'll come to the mic.
How do we know that by the time you check the software, that the software hasn't been manipulated and changed?
Yeah, it's in escrow, and yeah, I mean, how do you know? Well, presumably you have agreements and you have a chain of custody and you have it all documented. I mean, unless you yourself are sitting with it all the time, I don't know. Some of that is on faith, but I mean, presumably these things are in escrow and documented, and where they are and who had access to them. That should be all documented.
Yeah. If the voting machine company is the one that gives it to someone to put into escrow, right? So
Yeah, go ahead.
One has to assume that the version of the copy of the software that the voting machine company put in escrow was the very best copy, the pristine copy. So you won't know if it was different than the one that was loaded into your voting machine. It might have been different, but you can look at the version of the software the voting machine puts out there as the very best version and notice that even that has some flaws in it, which has been the case in history. Every time someone got a hold of voting machine software, they find flaws. And it's good to document those flaws, even if they're only in the best version of the software.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to that is, I know like Mr. Christensen over there has a lot more software and technical knowledge than I would, and I would imagine that'll be a topic of one of the workshops as well. So, or you can more bluntly just go ask him. Anything else? Yeah.
Tom from Milwaukee. I did a couple counties minutes audits, and one of them was Greene County. As I went through it, there were 3 wards that had, I was starting to see trends where maybe 18% or so, 15% absentee seemed normal. But I ran into about 3 wards that had over 30.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what's normal, but it flagged those. And then the other issues that I saw a few vote flips, which is kind of interesting. And in one case, you literally saw that the people that did the manual recount visually recounted, and they saw that the guy actually crossed out the Trump vote and put in a little arrow to the person he really wanted.
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting. And then, so as far as my question, there's 2 questions I got. One is the percentage of absentees that's considered beyond normal. And then the other question is, you're balancing between the number of people that have registered when you sign in, and then the number of ballots. And there was a few cases where those disagree, but if you guys could just kind of review what happens at the end of the day, what are those checks that they do before they close down that award, the basic checks. It's basic accounting.
Yeah. Let me just answer. I'll answer the absentee, and I'll let you do the end of the day if you'd like. The absentee, I don't know an exact percentage of what's considered normal or abnormal or whatever. What I can tell you is that, I had this conversation with my parents actually, because they were like, absentee, why do people vote absentee? Because, it just turns into so many problems. I said, try not to think of it as absentee voting. Try to think of it as early voting. And early voting is good. So I early voted, partly because I was going to be working, on voter protection all day on election day. So I'd rather be doing that than spending my time voting that day. I already did it. But early voting is good, and there should be more of it, actually. So, and I think there have been concerted efforts to do more of it. So if those percentages keep going up, that's great, as long as they're, valid votes. So I would say that about absent or early voting. Let's call it that. But go ahead.
Actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about early voting too. There is no normal with early voting these days. I think the overall percentage in the state was something between 25 and 30% early votes cast. But it's becoming more and more popular, and the major political parties are pushing it more and more and more. And there was, a big legal fuss before this election that gave early voting a lot of publicity and whatnot. So we're in a state of flux right now with early voting, and I think that's part of the reason why. Again, I didn't touch on it in my remarks earlier, but mishandling of those early ballots was one of the big findings in the Wisconsin recount. Dane County alone, they found more than 6 absentee early votes just left in their envelopes, not accepted, not rejected, just not noticed. And all over the state, there was just, debates about whether we should accept or reject this early ballot, and counties were reversing municipalities, decisions of municipalities were, accept, reject. It's all over the board. There was just a real big mess revealed in the handling of early votes in Wisconsin. I don't think that's a permanent situation. Again, I think it's because there's just been this explosion in interest in early voting, primarily pushed by the major political parties that find it easier to run get-out-the-vote efforts when they can get out the vote for 6 weeks ahead of an election rather than, doing it all on one day. And I'm not a big fan of early voting. It's good, it's convenient, but we have to resolve some of these administrative problems too. And the other thing I want to point out, I'm an independent, political independent. I ran as an independent. We've got a third-party candidate before you. Early voting, when they push it really hard, just doesn't give voters a lot of time to look at all the choices on the ballot. And I ran into that canvassing door-to-door as an independent, even 4 weeks before the election, sometimes 1 in 3 doors I've knocked on, they say, I've already voted, I never heard of you. And there's drawbacks. Okay, poll closing. Wisconsin poll workers tend to do a real good job of that. They keep track of the voters that signed the poll book, and they keep track of the number of ballots that the machine counted, and they match them up. And it's practically a religion with some of them. They are so proud of the work they do, and I agree with them. Very often they're off by 1 or 2, and it drives them crazy. And this is the point at which I do want to back off and say, human beings do run our elections. And there will always be a certain amount of human error. And there is a point at which we do have to kind of tolerate just a little fuzz at the margin, with 1 or 2 unresolved questions about why do we have 1 more ballot than voter or 1 more voter than ballot or whatever. They do try, Wisconsin poll workers do try their best to resolve those. And although there's lots of little discrepancies, I wouldn't consider it a big problem.
Thank you. I want to intervene here. We got 3 people on the stack. But Tom, in terms of his question and his observation, I just want to ask, how many people in the House worked in the recount, worked at the polls, worked at the boiler room? Thank you very much. So important. Out front. Bill, you're next.
Thank you. It's my understanding that there has been some countries that have thrown out electronic voting because it's not verifiable, which means that people haven't consented to be governed. So you're doing good work. Thank you. Suppose you do find very solid evidence that an election was invalid. Of course, down the road, after a radical extreme agenda has been implemented, what is our recourse?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, and remember, this is this also. The true answer is I don't know legally what the recourse is. The practical effect, it would still just be 1 state, and so it wouldn't change the electoral result. I think the importance of it is for, again, verifying and making sure there's a system in place that we trust. I think that an audit, or a real audit, is a good thing. I think also for my and for everybody's purposes, you know, some of that investigation or inspection is for the next time, so that everybody's game is raised. The election commission, the vendors, the candidates, everybody should be, you know, there are improvements that can continually be made. So does it, you know, unfortunately change the, you know, overall result? Probably not. What the exact legal recourse is of something like that, I honestly, you know, don't know at this point, but it is still extremely important to do. And I think, you know, the overarching, you know, stepping back, I mean, obviously it'd be, you know, great to change the result. I don't think anybody, you know, in this room would. Yeah. But in terms of, you know, creating and building more confidence in the system, you know, if there was a big mistake, they need to fix it. And if there wasn't, people should know that too.
Yeah, and just to underscore that, the recount from the start said that the purpose was not to change the outcome of the election, which is true. You know, we really wanted to challenge the system and to show evidence of how the system is failing us, and thereby to fix it. And an example of this is the state of New Mexico, which in 2004 had tried to do a recount but was denied the recount. And then they went to court, which then established that they should have had a recount. And that led to an ongoing citizen effort where they got rid of their electronic voting machines. They established automatic audits and automatic state-sponsored recounts. So that was really kind of our model of what we were going for. There's an example right now, I think it's North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, where the federal court just ruled that the districting was invalid, and therefore that the legislature had to be reelected. And it raises the question, well, what happens about all the laws that are being passed by this illegitimate legislature? And I don't think that has been asked, but I'm sure someone is going to take that question to court, and that will be very interesting. But North Carolina does present a very interesting case whereby once it's been proven that the election is invalid, that it has been deemed necessary to hold another election. And that would be a really interesting campaign to take forward if that was found. And
that's happening in this state, by the way.
In this state as well?
A federal judge has said that y'all,
yes,
it's literally unconstitutional.
Yeah, so a really interesting question, what will happen to the laws that have been passed in the meantime? Fascinating. So stay tuned and let's make it happen. Thank you.
Yeah, real briefly, Fred Kessler could get into that later. He's already looked at it, and the question has been raised, and they think here in Wisconsin, maybe all the laws that were passed would have to be thrown out. But the question I want to ask is, David Cobb last night mentioned two states was an automatic recount, New Mexico and another one, I don't remember what the other one is. There's an automatic recount in North Carolina. And I was part of the ad hoc committee that got that into the statutes. So, and a lot of people in North Carolina didn't know that it was on there. And last year with the McCrory-Roy Cooper race, where automatically McCrory was able to ask for a recount because the margin was just a couple of thousand votes. But then the lawyers and the legislature stands up and says, wait a minute, we have a 5% automatic recount in North Carolina. Just wait a second. So everybody waited. At random, they take 5% of all the precincts in North Carolina, and they recount the vote. Not just one race, the one in question for governor, but all the races, the whole ballot. It's all paper ballots in North Carolina. And believe it or not, the margin came out almost the same. But McCrory still asked for another recount because, and legally he was able to do that because it was in 0.5% difference of the total vote. And lo and behold, Roy Cooper picked up a couple of extra votes. But talk about recourse. Why don't we have that as a national standard? Okay, the ad hoc committee I was on, we wanted 10%, and we fought with the legislature. We got 5%. But the 5% last year proved worked. And it was really random. I mean, it was 1 out of 50 states at random. It was there at the right time. So that we should ask for that nationally, period.
Thank you, Eugene. I'm keeping stack up. I just want to do a time check. We're at the end of this period. We started late. I'd like to go 15 more minutes in this question and answer. If that's okay with everyone. I've got the gentleman there on the stack, then this gentleman and your third on the stack. Okay? Yes, sir.
I'm going to defer to my disability and use my teaching voice and stay here. In Illinois, we have a piece of legislation, House Bill 712, which is the Illinois Election Integrity Act, which relies heavily on the public accounting industry to design quality into our election system. Relying on recounts is like trying to achieve quality with inspection after the fact. And what we want to do is we want to design quality into our election system so that the votes are counted accurately on election day and the day after using independent public accountants to do 2 audits. The first is an operational audit. They come in before the election and they look at the system, the documentation, the security, the chain of custody, and then they issue a report identifying weaknesses and suggestions for remediation, okay? On election day, the independent auditors will go and get a hard copy of the poll tapes from every precinct. They'll create their own Excel spreadsheet, and they will do a parallel independent tabulation of all of the precinct votes and the state votes, so you don't have error or fraud in central tabulation. The third audit is conducted on election day in the polling places by the judges. 10% of all of the paper ballots are randomly selected for paper tapes in every precinct. I'm an auditor, I'm an audit professional. I think selecting 5% of the precincts in the district sucks, okay? It's inadequate. I wouldn't have any confidence in it. And the thing is that there's advance notice. In Illinois, we have 5% recounts, but the election authority has 1 week's notice knowing which precincts are going to be recounted. So you have ample opportunity to substitute ballots. By counting the paper on election day in the polling places by the judges, it'll take them 60 to 90 minutes. You'll have a fantastic scientific exit poll, and we'll know right away whether there's been error or fraud. Now, if people are interested in this legislation, I have the material with me, I can give it to you, but it provides a great solution for the state of Wisconsin and all the other states, because we must have not just audits that are kicked in at 1% margin or 5%, because in Waukesha County, Kathy Nicholas took the votes in the Supreme Court justice race and had them for 29 hours and came up with enough margin to be outside of the statutory recount. Okay, so there's 1% and 5%. Now, there are cases where if you do have quality in the system, you may need at some point to have an actual recount because it's that close, okay? But we don't want to rely on recounts to achieve quality, design quality into the system, and only use recounts as a very last extreme.
I'd like to comment on just a few themes that you raised. One of the big misconceptions is that the elections are final as soon as they really announce those preliminary results on election night. And that is not true. The election is not final until they certify the results. And as he started talking about, again, you can build quality in during that canvass period and check to make sure it's accurate before you declare it final. And the election isn't final until it's final. So you have time to do audits like he's recommending. And yes, another point that I want to reinforce is the routineness. The problem with recounts, people use the word recently, loosely, but the word recount as it technically stands in the law, again, it's an exception. The election officials don't do it on their own initiative. They wait for some candidate to ask for it and pay for it. No, checking accuracy needs to be routine. And that's another big issue that he just raised that I wanted to reinforce. The other thing is that there are national experts in auditing, and you have to bring in that kind of auditing mentality, and statisticians. They've developed something called risk limiting auditing, which I'm going to go into a little bit more in my session. The key thing is that there's no flat percentage that really works absolutely well. The point is you have to pick a sample that's big enough to confirm that you got the right winner, which might be 1%, might be 5%, might be 100%. And I'll explain risk limiting auditing a little bit more, but basically you start with a small sample, and if that doesn't give you statistical confidence that you've identified the right winner, you just keep expanding that sample, up to 5%, until you get confidence you've identified the right winner. And if that means 100% of the ballots identify a different winner, then that's what you do. So I just wanted to touch on those concepts.
I have a quick two-part question. One is it correct that no one on your team was able to actually view any ballots? Is it correct that no one on the recount team, your team, was able to actually view individual ballots?
No, people at the sites could.
Okay, because I had read that, so it must be incorrect.
No,
that the state would not permit your team to view the ballots. Only the state employed people could actually do that.
Can I respond to that? And I'm responding because I help coordinate both the 4th and 5th congressional districts. In Milwaukee, we are in a position to be right across the table and be able to read the ballots and say, put that in this stack, put that in that stack. It varied around the state. Waukesha was a whole lot different, just trying to see what was happening. So there was a lot of variation around the state in terms of how much you could actually do that. So that's been part of our problem in this analysis. But thank you, George.
So you have an issue with Waukesha?
Huh? No, and just one quick follow-up too. I mean, it is a rule, like, in terms of observing, or should be able to observe, we can't actually handle it. Right. Only the election officials can actually handle the ballots. So that's a rule.
And do you have any idea of the number of individuals who were removed from the voter registration list in Wisconsin? I know other states it's occurred. Florida, 2000, for example. I mean, there was
I don't know anything about that.
Wisconsin has, I'm going to stand up here and brag, Wisconsin is really good. The thing that we have in Wisconsin that needs to be nationwide is election day voter registration. There's a lot of messing around with voter registration that works in other states as voter suppression that they don't even try in Wisconsin, because if you show up at the polls on election day and someone's canceled your registration for some unknown reason, you just re-register. It's like we're immune from that form of voter suppression here. And what that means is that if the legislature ever catches on to that, which they probably are, and they try to take away election day registration at the polls, we have to fight like hell.
Thank you. Just on the time check, we want to end this at 11, and we want to rework the agenda. I'll talk about that. 2 people on the stack, this gentleman here and then that gentleman. Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Wacer. I live in Regensburg, Wisconsin.
Use the microphone.
I worked with Karen McKim, who's an excellent person. But first of all, like they set up here, look around the room. Where are the Hispanics? Where are the blacks? Where are the people, period? You can't yell about something being wrong if there's this much interest in the whole state. That's really sad. Us, the people. I'm not pointing any fingers. First of all, I've been involved in 4 recounts. My county supervisor recount, my state senator recount, District 17, the state's district that used to have Dale Schultz. This recount, and also a judicial recount, sovereign recount. And what you see in a recount is utterly amazing. But that's after the fact. How many people go to election equipment checks? We had a recount in Stoughton on the move to amend referendum, primarily because the equipment checks weren't done right. We have to get people involved. If people aren't involved, you can have all the best rules by the best attorneys and have good leadership. But if you don't have the people, like, I'm really so frustrated and disappointed right now that this is all the people that showed up. I thought we would have to look for parking instead of the parking looking for us. No, but you have to get involved. You have to go to equipment checks. I know I've been the first person in 2 voting municipalities to ever even check. So, you have to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Will this one work? I guess. Referring back to the Marinette count, we had 31% with the one machine that nobody voted for president, and I mean that I'm sure that was excessive, but I think I wonder what a reasonable thing is, because I was an observer for the Adams County recount, and we could look right at the ballots and everything. There was a mix of some from machine, some from paper, but unless I saw certainly not even 10%, but I did see, certainly more than 5 probably, of paper ballots where people did not vote for the president, but voted a down ticket anyway. And which, like you even said, that seems odd for a presidential election. And wondering if, there might be something else going on here.
When the day comes that we do routine post-election audits, we'll be able to gather information about that and figure out what the predictable undervote rate is in any race. I mean, we just don't do that now, we don't know. But, the general knowledge is the top of the ticket races, the undervote rate got to be less than 1%. And anything higher than 1% is suspicious. And you're absolutely right. There are always some people who will leave the race blank for whatever reason. And I, too, looking at the ballots in this recount, got the sense that in this presidential election, it was a little bit higher than usual. People just really just saying, I'm going to go vote for U.S. Senator and my local county board supervisor, whatever. And just leaving it blank. I think it was a little higher than usual in this race, but it still shouldn't be above 1%.
Thank you, Karen. I'll allow one more question, and we're going to have to move on. Yes, ma'am.
Putting a woman, last but not least, in the stack for questions and comments. Karen, you mentioned the election in '04, and my husband and I were here canvassing for Karen. And we had the opportunity to walk around Milwaukee. I'm not sure what area we were in. Sometimes we were talking to people out of their apartment windows. Sometimes we saw mattresses on the street indicating to me they were being evicted. And they were all voting for Karen. We went to a polling place in a park. May not be far from here, I don't know. Miserable weather. Cold. Perhaps it was raining that night. Lines out the door. Polling place almost closed. the same-day registration that day. The point of this little history, when we left Wisconsin to drive back to Chicago, Kerry was winning. And on the drive back, Kerry lost Wisconsin. What happened, people? This is not something new. This has been going on probably a longer time than any of us ever became aware of. So my advice to all of us is the world is watching, and everybody here, and even if people aren't here that we wish were here, we're the messengers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Family, we'd like to adjust the schedule, but I'll tell you, I want to adjust it, as the conference coordinator and conferring with other members of the committee. We always have concerns about being talking heads only. And so this last session is real important in that we have this intimacy. We want to allow that to extend as much as possible. Now we can try to figure out, why half the people voted this year that voted in 2008. We can go through all these manipulations, but this is what we have. And we are not alone. There are tens of thousands of people who've been viewing this live stream on 4 different sites. There are hundreds who are staying with it. And I think that's really significant in this digital age. And so this is a situation where we want to expand. We're working with what we have. What I'd like to propose, because I'm a proponent of that, the mind can endure as long as the seat can absorb. So what we'd like to do is to take a 15-minute break, get to know each other, and then we're going to go into the first series of workshops. In this room, and it's on your schedule, is verifiable elections with Karen McKim, ranked choice voting with Andrew Beeman from Faribault, Minnesota. Hey, Andrew, that's over in 240. And a very significant issue to Wisconsin and the Latino community is voter ID. And Omar Barberino will be in room 280 from Voces de la Frontera. So as we proceed, we've been backed up in time, and we really want to make more time for you to interact. So I've discussed it with other people. And looking at us, we're kind of upper generational and not as mobile. So we did have a plan to do a march over immigrant rights about 7 or 8 blocks away, have a little rally, come back in 50 minutes. We want to take more time for discussion, but at 1 o'clock we have box lunch, and we'll have open mic so that everybody can contribute to the discussion about voter ID and immigrant rights. And that's how we'd like to adjust the schedule. Is that okay with everybody? All right. Next session started in 12 minutes. Thank you.
Just to let everybody know, 240 is basically over right here, and 280 is further down the hall.
Oh, I want to holler one more thing out. Acknowledging County Supervisor John Weishon is in the house. Hey, John. Longtime national political leader from South Carolina, Bill Kreml's in the house. Hey, Bill. From the Liberty Tree Foundation and former presidential candidate David Cobb is in the house. Thank you. See you later.
Hang tight with us as we move to our next conference.
I think they're going to be doing
Remember to refresh your page to get back on it.